Greetings, everybody. Welcome to our fifth in our series on the uh, spiritual disciplines, the celebration of discipline by Richard Foster, our fall sermon series. We are talking about the first of our outward disciplines this week, which is on simplicity, which is kind of an interesting thing, and we'll get into that. But our scripture reading that connects with this theme comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 19, verses 16 through 22. Then someone came to him, Jesus, and said, "Teacher, what good deed must I do to have eternal life?" And he said to him, "Why do you ask me about what is good? There is only one who is good. If you wish to enter into life, keep the commandments." And he said to him, "Which ones?" And Jesus said, "You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, honor your father and mother. Also you shall love your neighbor as yourself." The young man said to him, "I have kept all these. What do I still lack?" And Jesus said to him, "If you wish to be perfect, go sell your possessions and give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come and follow me." When the young man heard this word, he went away grieving, for he had many possessions. So our message this week is on the first of the outward disciplines in our Celebration of Discipline series, as I mentioned. What is an outward discipline? We've been talking about inward disciplines the last 4 weeks, that is, practices that are intended to explore and order and shape our inner world of thoughts and desires, tools we can use to guide our minds and our hearts. But as we all know, we're physical beings, heavily influenced by our settings, our set and setting, as they say. The places and the people that surround us are important, and it turns out that over the long history of Christian spiritual practice, we found some settings that work better than others for the development and fostering of our spiritual life. So a setting is, in the broadest sense, it's just the state of the world that surrounds you. Your homes, your work, your schools, your families, your friends, your town, etc., right? These are the spaces that you inhabit. The spaces that you inhabit can be tremendously influential on your inner state. Our inner life conforms to some degree or another to our setting, to our surroundings. Now that's not news. I'm sure we all know this to some degree or another, but we may sometimes take it for granted just how much our outward conditions can really affect us. So the question becomes, what sort of settings or conditions help us with our spiritual walk? And I suppose, in the same sense, what sort of conditions make it difficult for us? So that's what we'll be talking about even over the next couple of weeks. And today we're starting with a concept called simplicity. So simplicity it's both an attitude that we nurture and also an outward condition that we set around us. And the idea behind it is, it's pretty simple in its broadest sense. It's kind of chaos management, right? And you can look at it in one way relative to time. Like if you find yourself harried and harassed by the spaces that you inhabit, so chaos management can also be, like spatially, like if the house is constantly a mess, right? And there are 100 things to do or to fix, and work is a mess maybe, and disordered and constantly overwhelming me, and school assignments, right? We were doing confirmation Sunday this week, so we talked a lot about the kinds of prayers that the kids would consistently pray about in confirmation class, which had to do with school homework and sports demands and so forth. Stuff everywhere to keep track of and to maintain. And if you find yourself in that kind of Calgon, take me away kind of place, then we need to start working on the discipline of simplicity. Simplicity is the tool that we can reach to help us to contain the chaos and reorder our space and our time in such a way that helps us to keep God focused, keep oriented toward God. So different people have different tolerances for chaos, right? And all of us need some chaos in our life because we can get stuck in ruts. So I'm not trying to say that all chaos is bad or something. All of us need some kind of chaos in our life because we have a tendency to also get too constrained and too kind of caught into a routine, and calcified and just stuck. And we need things to shake things up in our life from time to time, right? That's what chaos is good for, to shake things up or maybe create new growth in our life. I've never thought about something like that. I've never, experienced something like that. And that helps to revivify, I guess, our inner life. So it's not that chaos is all bad. This is really about when chaos is out of control. When the pendulum is swung too far to the chaotic side, then simplicity can help us pull it back. But when we are inundated, so in this case, when we're inundated with chaos, we find ourselves being torn in all directions at once, or at least feeling like we're being dragged behind the horse. We're not really riding it anymore. We're just getting pulled along with whatever is happening to us, whether that's commitments that we've made or health conditions that are pulling us along, or whatever it is. We're not really riding the thing. We're just getting dragged along behind it. Stress goes up, anxiety goes up. It's not a good place to be, particularly chronically for long periods of time. I mean, of course, we all have periods of time, small periods of time, hopefully, where things are crazy, a busy week or whatever. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the normal steady state of your life. If your average normal state is perpetually chaotic, then to a degree that's uncomfortable for you, because different people can handle that, right? I live with a chaos monster. Stina's able to manage a ton of things, my wife, and she but I have to push that away constantly. I have to carve out a little space that keeps my simple mind directed the way it needs to be, because I just can't handle it all. It just overwhelms me. So we're all in different places with this. So again, it's not saying that there's some standard of chaos that we should be, trying to limit ourselves to, because you could be really good at handling that and be comfortable in a more chaotic place, and some of us are like me, are just we need our little box, our little blinders on, so we can keep ourselves focused. In any case, simplicity, when we find ourselves overwhelmed, regardless of our tolerance for chaos, simplicity is the right direction to go to lower the chaotic bar, I guess. And that, like the other disciplines, can be really hard. It might mean cutting out things that we've committed to, and just admitting to ourselves and to the others that maybe we've made commitments to that I've bitten off more than I can chew. I'm not going to do that. I'd be able to do this, and I have to give up some responsibilities in order to keep things focused that are most important to me. So kind of the consolidation and letting go of things. I may have to say no to offers or opportunities of things that maybe I would really like to be a part of, but I just can't fit it in at this point in my life. That's not so easy, right? There's a tendency to want to say yes to things. And that can be really hard. And what it requires is a strong sense of clarity in our life about what is important to us. What are your highest priorities and most important commitments that you would like to maintain and keep, right? So knowing what that kind of hierarchy of priorities are in your life, knowing that in an explicit way helps to draw boundaries when the chaos starts to close in, if that makes sense, right? So because I know where I'm going, because I know what's important to me, I'm going to delineate that out in a strong way, so that when commitments and messes start to overwhelm me, I'm like, I know what I need to cut out because this is where I'm going, right? It's kind of like turning down the heat when the pot's boiling too much. We want chaos at a simmer, not a rolling boil, something like that. So, and here's another thing. Our prioritizing that, keeping that strong delineation, keeping that direction or that orientation, that hierarchy set up, if the highest priority up on top isn't God, then, and the orientation, toward the capital G good, everything down the chain of priorities isn't going to work as well. So So simplicity really has to do with focusing as well. So there's a delineation to keep chaos out, but there's also like, well, what am I directing myself toward? And if I'm not directing myself toward God, if I'm directing myself toward something that's not God, I'm going to find that all of that hierarchy is not going to withstand the chaos. It's just not meaningful enough. The only thing that's meaningful is God, and God makes everything in our life meaningful. Don't think of God as sort of this sort of being that sits out here and that is one of many choices of things that we can think about. God is in all and through all. And so for example, we all have had or are in the midst of important roles in our life, right? Maybe you've been a mother or a father or a friend. Those roles, though, are empty. You don't just want to be a mother or a father or a friend, right? These are important priorities for many people. You want to be a good mother and a good father and a good friend. Being a bad mother, bad father, bad friend, that's not really a goal that we're trying to orient ourselves toward. What we're really trying to orient ourselves toward is to say, I want to be a good version of these roles and not just an empty version of these roles. It's implied when we say, I'm a mother, I'm a father, I'm a pastor, I'm a friend, I'm a whatever. It's implied that you want to be a good one of those things. It's the good part, though, that should be the priority. And not just, pick any role, manager, worker, student, teacher, whatever. The roles themselves are nothing without the orientation to be a good student, to be a good teacher, right? So the orientation is what matters. And all the way at the top of it, right up here, right before God maybe, is I want to be a good human being, a good person, right? So all of this hierarchy of roles and things that we've committed to maybe culminates with this one thing, that to just be a good human being. But the problem is we don't define what good means. We don't define what good is, right? We're not the judges of the good. Only God alone is good. And that's what our passage, the young man who approaches Jesus and asks him, good teacher, he says, well, what do you mean? Only God alone is good, Jesus reminds us. So to be good at anything means that we are first orienting ourselves toward God, right? And once we are aligned with that, and good, when we say we're good at something, what we're really saying is that good is just the active principle of love. To be a good human being is to be a loving human being. To be a good teacher is to be a loving teacher. To be a good mother is to be a loving mother, and so on and so forth. That is love in the sense of we are in right relationship with everyone around us. We are in the correct relationship, that we care for others, we're lifting them up, so on and so forth. So to be good is to be loving, and to be loving is to be in right relationship with God and with those around us. So that's the hierarchy. If we don't have God at the top, the rest of this is we're just playing games. We're just making things up. What's a pastor? What's a teacher? What's a father? What are these things if you're not good at, if they're not good roles? So last point on simplicity. So the summary there is to say, simplicity is not just about keeping the boundaries of chaos at a simmer, or keeping the overwhelming chaos at a simmer or down. It's also about keeping our orientation directed correctly. Simply. If we're simply oriented toward God in all that we do, it keeps those bright boundaries intact. And then we can make wise choices about what to accept into our priorities and what to reject. That's simplicity. There's also one more point on simplicity, and Jesus mentions it right at the end of the passage when he tells the young ruler to go and sell his stuff. Well, we have to talk about stuff. I've said this on a couple of occasions in sermons, and people laugh or think I'm joking, but I've said, look, if you're really smart, if you're really beautiful, if you're really talented, or if you're rich, if you have lots of stuff, you have problems. That's not necessarily a great place to be in terms of your spiritual walk, right? And folks will laugh at me because it seems ridiculous, but they're only laughing at me because we live in such a materialistic world where that's what everybody's aiming for, is sort of material moreness, if you want to say that. In a world that's kind of built itself on becoming a success, and a success means a material success, then saying things like having more is dangerous potentially or problematic is it just seems ridiculous. But who doesn't want to be smart or beautiful or talented and rich? And I know you can't necessarily being smart and beautiful and talented, that may not be your choice. You just may have been born that way, but those are all problematic in the same way, because the fact is that it's considerably more difficult, and I think this is what Jesus is getting to. It's considerably more difficult to be in right relationship with God when you have all of these things distracting you from it. Because when you are put on a pedestal for being beautiful, or for being talented, or for being rich, or for being smart, or whatever it is that the world loves about you and craves and desires, right? If you are put on a pedestal for one or more of those things, you are essentially being worshipped by our culture, right? And it's very difficult to not feel like God in some sense, like in a minor sense. Nobody necessarily is thinking, well, now I'm God because I'm a great whatever athlete or Olympian or something. But boy, oh boy, it's really hard not to feel good about getting all of that attention and having my value structure, my sense of self, become all wrapped up in my talent, in my intelligence, in my beauty, in my wealth. And if those things are removed, and they all are at one point or another, then you fall apart, because your sense of self has been too tightly woven around these properties. And once those properties leave, Olympians aren't Olympians for long, and our performances all kind of start to tail end. Beauty and intelligence, they tail off over time, and so wealth is left. Wealth you can keep all the way to the end. And then you lose it at the end, but maybe people think that's okay. But the problem is all along, if you're really wealthy, that you have the ability to dictate how your life is going to go, right? So you may not be smart or beautiful or talented, but you can be rich. Anyone can be rich. And in that richness, in that wealth, it's a trap. We are capable of becoming a little god of our little kingdom, whatever, scope that might take. And so hardship, difficulty, having things the way I want them, these are all very potent, overcoming, not having any hardship, not having any difficulty, overcoming, having things the way that I want them. Like, those are all very potent ways for us to be distracted from God and to get our orientation off. So we're not orienting ourselves toward the good, we're orienting ourselves toward what can make us a little bit more potent in this world, in this life, to become rich. And so in that way, if our goal is to become worshipped ourselves, because people come to us and ask us for things, and we get to be beneficent, is that a word? But yeah, I think so. You know what I mean? And that's a real stumbling block for getting ourselves oriented to the good. And it's also the reason why Jesus is like, to be poor, not to say that we should be destitute and struggling to survive, but in some sense, if we can keep ourselves in that zone where our spiritual walk is not inhibited by the things that we own, symbolized by the money that we have, then we're doing well. We're working in the right way. So that's simplicity. I had other things that I talked about in the sermon but those were kind of directly to the confirmands because it was Confirmation Sunday and I didn't have a whole lot to wouldn't make sense in this context. So I hope you have a great and blessed week. I will see you next time. We're going to be talking about a kind of a combination of solitude and silence as our second context. So that'll be next week. Have a great week. God bless.